Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Pebbles Turbyville. I'm the Executive Director of Horses and Humans Research Foundation, and we just wanted to welcome you to our webinar series. Tonight we have Evelyn and Octavia, who are going to be talking about Equine Assisted Services Research Repository Project. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump right in.
Well, I'm going to start. So I'm Octavia Brown, and some of you, I'm sure I know. And I am a Horses and Humans board member and also chair of the Education Committee. I'm a Pathmaster instructor, and I'm an emeritus professor at Centenary University. And now I would like to introduce Evelyn. And I am not going to say much. She's going to do all the talking. And she is a past president of Horses and Humans. Over a career spanning 30 years or more, she's led business and education teams through challenging organizational change. She coaches online, working with leaders in Fortune 100 to 500 companies. She's developed equine facilitated executive coaching, which creates opportunities for teams and individuals to explore leadership, communication, and inter and intra-personal relationships. She's also a certified horse trainer, and she tries to bring an added dimension to coaching with horses, helping us all to see the subtle body cues of information that horses are trying to tell us. That is particular interest to me because I think so many of us do not really pay attention closely to what the horse is actually trying to tell us. In this presentation, she's going to discuss her current project to bring diverse interest groups together to create a global online source for those seeking information on research on the human-equine bond in all its diversity. So before Evelyn takes it away, I'd like to ask you to save questions to the end, but please enter them in the chat box as we go along. Also, we're going to use the chat box. Don't raise your hand because I never know how to deal with that. And please, everyone, mute yourselves as I will do so that background stuff doesn't come through. So Evelyn, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Octavia. And it's great to be here today. This is not my project, but a project that a bunch of us are working on. I have to just explain that picture of me before we go further. This is the most recent picture taken of me, which was last week on Sable Island off the coast of Nova Scotia, where it's about 300 kilometers out to sea and over 450 horses live there, wild, untouched. It was quite an experience. How do I make this thing go? There. This project began out of a series of meetings that started in April of 2020 when members of HHRF's board and HETI's board decided to start meeting to talk about our common interest. HETI is the Federation of Horses in Education and Therapy International, and it's based in the EU, but they have members globally. So we talked about a wide range of things, but we kept coming back to the notion that research was something that everyone seemed to be saying they couldn't find and access enough quality research. And it was a problem to paywalls and that sort of thing. So that became a focus for us. And out of that, we decided to ask the question, is there a widespread desire for greater access to EAS research? And what we found out was, yes, indeed there is. And how we found that out was by doing a survey. So last fall, we put up a survey to ask a bunch of questions really about global interest as widely as we could find people who wanted to respond to it, to ask about this business of access to equine assisted research or horse-human bond. We've used the term EAS because it's a standard term that is being promoted in North America. Not everyone likes that term, but we are all about increasing our standards and protocols. And so we've chosen to use this term for the time being. So EAS is really a term that we're using as a blanket term to discuss all of those disciplines and practices that include the horse-human interaction. Let's see. So I'm going to give you the results of the survey, the highlights, by the numbers. So we had the survey up and available for a couple of months last fall, and we got responses from all over the world, almost. Asia, Australasia, Central America, Czech Republic, EU and the EEA, Israel, North America, Russia, Turkey, the United Kingdom, as you can see. So that was pretty good. I would have loved to have seen us get a wider range and a bigger number, but that was the best we could do at the time. So the highlights include basically 99.9% of respondents said they were interested or very interested in the field of equine assisted services. So we knew we were talking to the right people. 7 out of 10 or 70% are working in the field of equine assisted services. The others were students of, volunteers, researchers who had this included in their areas of expertise. We did get some data about their relationship to this field. But basically, we got a good percentage of the people who are actually working in the field. 9 out of 10, let's see, said they do look for research into the field. So they're in the habit of looking for it. 7 out of 10 said they do encounter barriers to getting access to good research. 95% said they would find a single authoritative source or repository into the field of equine assisted services as very valuable or valuable. We also asked questions about what would be the benefits. We had some ideas about what the benefits would be, and so we had responses to that. 75%, 73% said it would build knowledge of emerging practices, both for what works and what doesn't work. 72% said it would understand and utilize best practices, standards, methods, and protocols. And that comes back more and more all the time. Best practices, standards, methods, and protocols. 60% provide a research-based framework to support one's approach to EAS. A lot of people are looking for the evidence that supports the way they're working in equine assisted services. Let's see, 47% said that it would enhance one's ability to partner with other organizations who require evidence of the effectiveness of EAS. 55% provide evidence to support funding applications, and 53% to explore research and evaluation designs that could apply to my work. The others, where we asked for their open input, I'll give you just a taste of some of the responses. Having a journal that published peer-reviewed, high-quality research in the field of EAS would, quote, put EAS on the map, end quote, and add validity to our fields of EAS practice and research. Now, we weren't talking about a journal, but we'll come back to that later. We were really talking about research. So that it would enhance relationships with governmental organizations, for instance, ministries, parliament, health agencies, scientific equine assemblies, etc., to have more serious proofs and to be taken more seriously into account. Someone said, provide a place to send my students when they're researching for their papers and research projects in practice. To build a stronger foundation to connect with people who might benefit from EAS. Clearer communication about EAS, and this has come up a lot. What are we talking about? We have a variety of terms that we use without really clear definitions. Make it easier for researchers to replicate research and get bigger sample sizes. And this one is also an important one. Gain access to insurance reimbursement. Evidence-based research using quality research protocols with a control group and statistically significant participant pool. Not anecdotal. Use neurological medical instruments. Partner with veterinary hospitals. To bridge the data on equine welfare interacting with humans from education and therapy applications to sport horse and general recreational riding. So that's another interesting one, because there's a huge population of people whose interactions are sport oriented. So having gotten those results, we went back and created a working group and started thinking about the future and talking about a vision for the future. Where are we going to go? Now that we know that there is a desire for this, that there is a use for this, where are we going to go with this? The topics that were important, most important, that are important to the vision of the future for this include access. And by that, typically, we mean open access. And open access means, you know, no paywall, or not necessarily having an affiliation. And typically what the definition of best practices or ideal is called open access, which is a set of principles and a range of practices through which research outputs are distributed online, free of charges and other barriers. Robust findings. And again, this is another one that's not really well defined in terms of EAS, but we all have an idea. It's like art. We know it when we see it, but we don't have a definition yet. So these are all things that we need to work to define more thoroughly. Robust findings, typically we would think of in terms of methodologies that produce reliable data that are perhaps, or methods or models that are reproducible. Evidence-based, and another term that is, I use that term all the time, and it's not what I thought it meant. So apparently, PubMed says evidence-based research is research that uses prior research in a systematic and transparent way to inform a new study so that it is answering questions that matter in a valid, efficient, and accessible manner. I think what we're talking about very commonly is, again, going back to fact and reproducible, and again, what we would call as robust. Common standards and protocols, methods. These are things that we go back and forth and discussion a lot, and they just don't exist. Everybody wants them. They're being discussed and developed in HETI's organization. We're talking about it in HHRF. I'm sure PATH is talking about it, and pretty much any organization, ISES. Everybody wants standards and common language definitions and protocols. And also we want ethical treatment. Again, no common definition for this yet, but certainly ethical treatment of both participants and the horses is a desired part of good research into this topic. So out of this working group, we have had a number of discussions, and we are starting to, oops, I forgot this one, sorry. International research. We want this research to be available internationally. Currently, we're working in English only, but it would be desirable for us to be able to serve other language populations, and truly make this research repository available to spread worldwide. Currently, we're doing community building. So we're working with a number of partners or members of HETI, especially. And we're in discussions on a regular basis. So we've broken away from the meetings of HHRF and HETI are continuing, but we've set up another set of meetings to deal specifically with this topic. and largely with membership from HETI's members, EU members. We're looking to build increasingly community. We're going to apply for funding for next steps. We have a goal to have face-to-face meetings where we can dig into these topics and this vision to build definitions, clarify our roles, responsibilities, and partnership structures. We also need to do a methodology and a needs assessment, requirements analysis, if you will, for what people want to see in this repository. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. So we need to also propose an operational model and a structure that includes budgets, governance, capital and operational funding, and long-term operational funding. So we need to look for funding sources. Our current partners in alphabetical order are Canada, Czechoslovakia, Greece, Ireland, Portugal, Sweden, Turkey, the UK, and the US. So it's really interesting to share the commonality of our interests with people from a diverse group of countries. And our meetings are going very well. These people, typically from the European Union though, they have had a lot of experience with what used to be called Erasmus and is now being called Horizon Europe. So the EU has very abundant funding available that fits our kinds of criteria to do further investigate and create a model for what we would like to do. Horizon Europe has billions of dollars available, and they fund specifically sport, education, technology, innovation, and those kinds of things. And so we are going to proceed in putting in an application that's going to get us closer to meeting our goals of getting together face-to-face and pursuing this. This Science Open, I'm bringing this up as a candidate, and I do want to introduce you to it if you haven't already heard about it. Science Open is an existing platform that hosts research and is a single interface. And so for those of you that may not have experience with a single authoritative interface like this, I want to show you what that looks like. As soon as I find it. Wait a minute. What's the problem?
I'm always glad when someone else has problems with technology. It's always my particular bugaboo.
I know, and that's been the latter part of my career was all about technology. Science Open is an online journal. You can see its URL here, scienceopen.com. I encourage you to go there. It is easy to create an account and poke around and see what you find. Their clients are increasingly including educational institutions. Typically, repositories were built for educational institutions as well as single topic organizations. So ResearchGate is a kind of a newer model because it incorporates research of different types. But before that, typically they were, for instance, the Microbiology Society, Open Science MOOC Society, American Waterworks Association. So University of Huddersfield is a good example of a university repository that's moving away from having their own built institutional repository to buying into this kind of a model. Genetic Society of America, and other single topic issues. So we would be one of those single topic kinds of groups that might find this really useful. So they tell you what they offer here, which is very rich for publishers, for researchers, for individuals. You can create an account at no charge and poke around in here and see what research you can find that interests you. You can create collections. And I'm going to show you by typing in, where is it? Here. What they already have in here. So this is the kind of interface. I'm going to move that over there. So hopefully you can see this. I don't know if you have to move your little celebrity squares thing around so you can see all of this. But on the left, there are sort of classifications. So I've typed in equine assisted and it's come up with 314 articles, 29 books, 1 book chapter. There are collections of animal welfare. So that's a focus of that's one collection. So some of these articles are going to have that as a focus. International Journal of Social Pedagogy, interesting. Some of them are going to be under this heading, etc. So, and then here you can narrow by publisher. You can narrow by journal, Journal of Equine Veterinary Science. A lot of these in here are veterinary science or science related. But you can start to see how these articles are compiled. There are 344 results. So you can read, let's see, this is an article, I think. Here are the authors. Read this article at the publisher. So this is probably a question of, this could be a question of access. There might be a paywall or a membership required to read the whole article. This is the kind of thing that we want to be able to come to terms with and create a key that opens the door to access. Here's an abstract, equine-related treatments for mental disorders. Most cited. This does, by the way, create those scores, alt metrics. This is an alt metric of 9. So the kinds of things that researchers are interested in terms of promoting their research and getting citations and being able to find other researchers or clinicians who are doing work on the same topic. This, if it were to be a single repository, that we could configure this to find everything, and we could increase the interest in using this as a publisher. Excuse me. Then the more that we do, the greater the value and the greater the use that we can have with this kind of thing. So as I said, you can go to Science Open and create yourself an account and poke around and see what you think. We're not saying that this is the solution. What we're saying is that so far, this is the only one that I've seen. It's called an aggregator. It's the only one that I've seen that is this thoroughly robust. It's very much like what I think PubMed looks like, but PubMed doesn't have our particular topic included in there unless it is specifically medical. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And this is the time to ask if anyone has any questions. So I'm going to pull up the chat box.
Anne is saying that she doesn't like that particular article that you pulled up, which brings to mind the issue of quality control or content. Would it be a free-for-all and you decide, the viewer decides on whether they feel it's valid or not? How would you deal with that?
Well, we are discussing the idea of having a curatorial or editorial governance board. You'll see, if you recall, there's also a star rating that you can apply to this, each of these articles, and you can write reviews to each of them. So we're not defining how we would handle that at the moment. What we are saying is that we would want to have a curatorial editorial board that would make those kinds of decisions. I think generally what we have been talking about as being as open as possible, to have as much as possible, even if it's not good research. It may be useful to us to find out why it's not good. But that has not been decided. We haven't made any decisions.
So, Anne, does that kind of answer your question?
It wasn't really a question. It was kind of a comment, and I was noting about the fact that sometimes I have to cite that Anestis article when I'm writing something where I say, you know, people have said this, but I don't agree with it, and that bumps them up the citation rankings. And I mentioned that to my husband, who's a political scientist, and he said, yeah, he'd heard that the most widely cited political science article is one that everyone agrees is awful and they disagree with, but they keep mentioning it because don't believe that because it's awful, but it gets mentioned, so it gets continuous citation. So we have to be careful about that sort of idea, that just because something is it's kind of popular in a way doesn't mean it's good. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be that it's a controversy, that people are arguing about something.
Yeah, you're right.
So it kind of depends, again, to what goes into any repository, that it has to be sort of considered before it gets put in there, not automatically.
Yep, you're right. And I think it's an important consideration, how we would handle that sort of thing. So someone has asked, would Science Open collaborate with Horizon or view it as competition? Horizon Europe is not a provider of this kind of aggregator. They're a funder. So they're a source that we would go to for funding. And we haven't, they have an interest in technology. And so this is, I don't think having, say, a private company vendor with a technology solution would be a problem for Horizon Europe, which is good, I think, good to know. We wouldn't have to build our own, because undoubtedly it would be very costly.
You had mentioned that the EU is really open to funding this type of project, correct?
Yes, yeah. They, HETI has membership who have all had experience pretty much, I think, with funding applications. And it is given out country by country. It's a complex system, and I haven't wrapped my mind around it yet. I still have to do a lot more reading on it, but they have lots of money. And the topics and the practices and the things that we're interested in have been funded in various ways by the past organization Erasmus and this. So Horizon Europe is definitely a good potential source for us.
And Horses and Humans is sufficiently international in concept that we would make a good partner with that, as well as with HETI, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And so one of the things that I'm learning as we go along is, because they all understand this, is how these partnership organizations work. So there are ways in which countries get together, or organizations from countries collaborate on funding applications and work together. And so there are some rules that Horizon Europe specifies on how these partnerships must be. And the dominant partners must be from EU countries. So, but we can have silent partners while we're working on building this community, right? So the partners are going to be the ones that apply for funding, and potentially what we're thinking of is getting funding to get people together face-to-face in these meetings, which will probably be in Europe. So the initial funding would be to bring people together, to discuss, define, work out, et cetera. But we would still be then collaborating as widely as possible outside of that partnership group with other people and other organizations to get the input that we would need to build as wide a community as possible. Nancy, does that answer your question? Nancy says, having a way to make research projects that didn't show significant results available is helpful, so other researchers can choose not to do the same thing. And ways that researchers and centers can work together will be helpful. Yeah, I think the other thing is increasing that N number. Because it's when people are working in one facility, it invariably seems to be with a smaller number of participants. And I gather the other thing is, because I'm not a researcher, the other thing is the control group idea. So what we need in order to do, say, research that spans a number of different facilities is to have commonly defined methodologies, procedures, so that whatever is being done in one particular set of interventions is being replicated identically in other facilities. That way you can increase that number and add in that control group idea. Anyone else have questions or comments? That was pretty fast.
What is the response from HETI? Are they really hot to trot with this? Do they like it very much?
They are. It's there's a lot of interest in this, a great deal, yeah. And I think it shows in the research, in that survey. Everybody has said it's difficult, you know, especially if you're not affiliated with the university. I spoke to Wendy Wood early this year to you know, just to tell her about this idea of an aggregator, you know, a single authoritative repository. And she was like, oh my God, she had just gone through the painful process of having her IT department build one for her latest research. She was looking at everything that had been published since 1980, you know, in a particular topic. And in order to find it, her IT department had to go in, and it took them weeks because it's out there, but it's not easy to find necessarily. So Tara, you've said, what else? More comments here. Nancy says one.
I was about to say the other problem, which you mentioned in the beginning of this, is terminology. And that's the hardest part about doing searches, in the sense that if you look up, it's therapeutic riding, equine assisted services, it's unfortunately therapeutic or therapy horses, or the terminology across the board is just a mismatch. And so it makes it difficult to do a search as well as build on other research for it. And so I mean, I know North America is kind of following, or most of us are following PATH's terminology white paper. But it is, like you said, an international problem because not everybody can agree on it. So I think that's one of our biggest hurdles.
It is, yeah. I just want to go back to these recent comments. Nancy says, one issue is not to manualize the approaches, but include the flexibility to respond to the participants in the moment is important. Tara says, horse-based and client-centered. Yes. Again, ethical concerns. Anne has said, difficult situation, not all studies can have a control group situation, etc. Can differ, and that's true. But from one discipline to another, for instance, how many of you have heard about that mini MRI that they put on a horse's forehead? Have you heard about that, Anne? I saw it last year for the first time. And so they are now, when you start getting instrumentation like that, then you start to be able to, say, if you're working in a field of PTSD or some other medically based treatment component, and you start using, have the ability to use instrumentation, then you start to be able to compare control groups with other groups. It's a fascinating thing, and it's a small piece of equipment. They strap it onto the horse's forehead. Anne, did you
Sorry.
want to say something?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
it's hard to keep I'm pretty slow at the typing. I make lots of typos and stuff. But I think a problem with that is partly, again, what one is assessing, but also things like financial situations. There are people, I mean, because I'm actually involved partly with HETI, and there are people who are in places in Europe, in small places, or in Africa even. They don't have these kind of the equipment. They don't have the equipment to do that sort of thing. But you can give somebody a survey or ask them questions, and that can be done anywhere.
Yeah.
So there's some things I think that it's difficult to do. Like, I'm from a small college that's affiliated with a large university. I don't have a humongous research grant or anything, and I'm looking at stuff to do with people where I'm asking them. I'm giving them surveys. I'm interviewing people. That sort of like measuring brainwaves would be really cool, but I can't do that.
Yeah.
So we're going to have it. That's another of the problems. There's a huge spectrum here with what people do, how they approach things, why they do them the way they do them, and what's available. And so, I mean, it's just incredible. There must be a huge amount of stuff that we could put into a repository.
Yeah.
But sort of trying to find out how. It's just, yeah. It's a fantastic idea.
It is.
Like, wow.
That was going to be my question. The research to put things into this thing, who does that? Who basically goes through and says, we need to take all of these articles that we found in this journal or that journal or some other one and plonk it into the repository? Who does that work? That's where the funding comes in, I assume?
Well, the editorial curatorial board would have responsibility for what we decide should go in there based on this community effort and definition. This operational costs, I think, will include something like an executive director and a technical support. And I don't know, in terms of the governance of the editorial curatorial board. But the way this thing works is it crawls the World Wide Web. So anything that's been published on the internet can be found, and you can program this thing to go and find. You can also add documents into the repository that's behind this interface, but there's a fee for that. So, Anne, you had a question?
But yeah, I'm sorry, when you said thing, what's the thing? There's some kind of automated scanning thingy?
Well, just like Google search, it's which has a back end that's designed to go out across the World Wide Web and find stuff that's related to what you asked it to look for. But what you can do with this, I believe, I haven't talked to them yet, but we will have a conversation. You can point it to known repositories. And so, or journals. So not everything is findable right away, but we would be relying on our community to bring it towards us and say, I can't get this on there, how come? Let's put it in there. Or what's the barrier? So it wouldn't be a fixed end product. It would be an ongoing maintenance issue to make sure that we continue to provide relevant research based on our criteria.
And I see that people are discussing the medical models of research. And one of the things that our education committee is particularly concerned with is to make sure that valid different designs of research can have at least as much weight as the sort of canonical quantitative, lots of data, control groups and all of that. And I think we're all agreed that good qualitative research and mixed types of research, as long as they're well designed, are just as valid. So this would certainly be a place for all of that. Yeah. I agree with somebody else's comment that the assessment tools that you use, there hasn't been a lot of research on producing really valid assessment tools for use at the operating center level. As a non-researcher and definitely a a center person, that is of great interest to me, for example. Pre and post questionnaires, have they been tested? Can I rely on those? So that kind of information would also be hugely useful to the person in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. There is so much going on. It's exploded. This equine hyphen stuff has exploded in the last 20 years. I went to ISIS, however you say that, in Guelph, I guess 2 or 3 years ago. And just before COVID, somebody is developing a mapping of all of the movements that a horse makes, for instance. So the ears, the eyes, the mouth, the nose, everything, which I think would be a fantastic project to, you know, my specialty, aside from coaching people, is reading horse behavior and speaking horse to horse in consistently in their language, physically. And so I have a big interest in seeing how that might come out, because to have a common shared understanding of the way that horses speak to humans, I think would be heaven. Something to be dearly wished for. For anyone who hasn't spoken up yet, please do feel free to come off mute and share your ideas and questions.
So well, they're thinking about it. Thinking about the repository thing. On the one hand, there's so much out there already that it probably would be, especially if there's some auto bot thing doing it, you could grab a lot of stuff and put it in there, providing the copyright was allowed. Then it becomes like anything on the internet, sifting what's useful.
Yeah.
So that might be where the humans come in and sort of say, okay, yeah, you know, this has got that word in the title, but it's not relevant. We'll ditch that one. So that there might need to be like a combination.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. As long as we don't have standardized words and vocabulary that we understand and share a meaning, that probably will have some part to play in how we populate this thing. Some of the other functions, by the way, are you can use it as a journal to publish. So as I said, someone made the comment about having a journal for this particular area of research would be great, and it would bring us some more cred. And it is possible to do that. There's extra cost associated with that, but it could become one of the outcomes of this. And the other thing it can do is handle conferences, so at an extra cost. And I see it as being potentially a fantastic way for people to make connections. So if you have everybody going to the same place and finding pretty much the same content and the same information, you're probably going to find people that you didn't know existed that were doing work in this area that you might really want to connect with. So it's potentially a really valuable resource for that, making those kind of connections too.
So is there anything that this current cast of people who've been listening to you that we can do to support you in this effort? There's at least a couple of countries represented here. So what can us in the field do to help out with this?
At the moment, I'm always thinking about money. And what I'd like to do is I would like to have a part-time project coordinator. Which sounds like we're not going to be able to necessarily get from Horizon Europe right away. So what I have been starting to think about is if there is a North American funder who would provide funding to hire a project coordinator that would help us move all this forward, because it's going to get much more intensive in terms of compiling information, tracking information, because we have to start talking about our meetings. We have to define the agendas for these meetings that would be part of our application for Horizon Europe funding. And we need to be much more intensively engaged with each other in terms of what are going to be the outcomes of each of those meetings, and what are we going to do with that outcome, which I believe is going to have a big component of taking it back to our own constituents and sharing it widely, and continuing to build community. Because I think that if not in the first year, in the second year, I think what we want to do is have a conference that we attract anybody who wants to come. And that would be probably based in Europe. And I'm pretty sure most people here wouldn't mind a trip to Europe.
I'm always game.
Yeah.
So I think the answer is, if you have interest in this, talk it up. I want to point out that there is a recording of this, so please feel free to share that as widely as you can. Bring up a group to talk about this, because it hasn't been done before. So this is a whole new place that we are trying to go. So please, use the power of whatever and spread the word, use the recording. Pebbles will help you out with that.
Yes, and also thinking of what you want. So when you go to, say, PubMed or ResearchGate or wherever you go to look for research, think about what you want in terms of the functionality, because we will next year, presumably, maybe even before that, we want to do another survey that will be a requirements analysis, development, an analysis of what it is that you want to have in this kind of an authoritative interface. And Science Open would be a good place to look, because you can see what it does that annoys you or what it doesn't do that you think we need to have. So I'd love to hear from anyone who does that and has an experience with it and wants to provide some input to how well it does what we think it might be able to do for us. And as I said, we haven't defined it as the solution yet. It's the only one it's the best one I've seen out there. In fact, I haven't looked lately, but I think it may very well end up being. Although I can't believe that nobody else is going to come out and try and compete with them, because as you can see, universities and other single topic associations are starting to really pile on there and use that. So, yeah.
Well, anybody else? Comments? Evelyn, we really appreciate you putting your efforts into this. By the way, Evelyn had to drop off of committees and the board and all of that to do this. So we wished her well, and we're sorry to lose her, but this is really, I hope it takes off really well for you, Evelyn, and you certainly have all of our support.
Yeah,
Well,
I was about to say, yeah, we really appreciate the fact that you even took a class on about repository, so that you could understand it better, so that we could really look at what we wanted in this project. And really, if you think about it, we've come a long way. It's just a matter of putting those last pieces together to make it happen. So we really, you definitely have done a great job of starting this project, and we hope to see it through.
And
I have to say,
Evelyn, you rock.
Yeah.
This is going to be so important to the industry. Thank you, Tara, for saying what we all think.
Oh, thank you.
You're very good at that.
In a couple of minutes, I just have to tell you the story of when we started talking about this, and I said, okay, I'll do it, because I worked in IT at the University of British Columbia for the last 14 years of my working career outside of coaching and working with horses. And I started there in 2000, and I remember hearing, it would be in these meetings and they'd be talking about repositories, and digital repositories were becoming, and open access and identity and authentication, and publishers were going out of business, and all of this stuff was going on. And I was like, it's not my stuff. So when we started talking about this, I thought, well, I'll just get hold of some people I know and see what they have to say. And nobody would answer me. Finally, I was asking too big a question. And finally, I contacted somebody from UBC who said, you have to take a course. So I did. And it is a very complicated topic.
But yeah.
But I think it's the way for us to go. I'm really excited about it. So
Well, we're
thank
so
you all.
glad that you did the research and took the class so you can better understand it to help us.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming today. It's been great to see you and talk about this. And please feel free, I'll put my email address in here if anybody wants to reach out.